Okay, so what if I told you that a top Pentagon insider, the actual guy who ran the US government's secret UFO program, has a pretty chilling warning for all of us? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into. His name is Luis Elizondo. He was the director of ATIP, that's the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and trust me, what he's saying is pretty unsettling.
Here's the thing he keeps saying over and over again. The clock is always ticking. Now, coming from a man who's seen what he's seen, that sounds incredibly ominous, right? So what on earth could he mean by that? Let's break it down.
To really get what he's warning us about, we have to go behind the curtain. Elizondo says there are a few different layers to this whole story. We're going to start with the most, let's say, conventional one, the explanation that has absolutely nothing to do with little green men.
So what is this ticking clock really about? Is it some kind of new Cold War, a foreign threat? Or is it a countdown to something way bigger? Well, Elizondo says it's kind of both. And the very first piece of this puzzle is all about good old-fashioned national security.
The first layer of this whole mystery is straight up geopolitical. From a national security point of view, as Elizondo explains it, you're always in an arms race. You can never, ever stop innovating because you have to assume your adversaries are working on something around the clock. And look, this isn't just some theory. Elizondo's on the record confirming that both China and Russia are running their own UAP programs. This all leads to the Pentagon's absolute worst nightmare, something called strategic surprise. Just imagine waking up one morning to find out that another country has technology that makes your entire military obsolete. Overnight. That is the first reason the clock is ticking.
But just when you think, okay, I get it, it's a new Cold War over crazy new tech, Elizondo totally throws a wrench in the works. He says the idea that this is only a foreign adversary, well, it just doesn't add up.
You see, he frames the problem in a totally different way. If this amazing technology is simply Russian or Chinese, then the United States is facing something far more embarrassing than just being behind in an arms race. And this timeline, wow, it really puts his argument into perspective. We've apparently been seeing these things for 80 years. Think about that for a second. 80 years ago, America was just entering the atomic age. We'd barely broken the sound barrier. No one had even been to space. So here's Elizondo's question. Does it really make any sense that an adversary secretly perfected this kind of tech back then, flew it over our most sensitive military bases for decades without ever being challenged, and it still outperforms anything we have today? For Elizondo, the conclusion is absolutely brutal. If this is just another country, it would represent an 80-year intelligence failure so massive, so profound, it would make every other intelligence failure in history look tiny by comparison, which leads him to one conclusion. He puts it bluntly, the idea that this is all just some terrestrial adversary, from an intelligence perspective, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test. So if it's something more than China or Russia, that leads to the next big, obvious question, right? Why the decades and decades of secrecy, the ridicule, and the flat-out denial? Well, Elizondo suggests the reasons go way beyond national security. He actually points to two incredibly powerful motivations for all the secrecy. One is about money, and the other is about faith. First, let's talk about the money. Elizondo basically confirms a theory that's been around for years. What if the government secretly gave recovered, non-human technology to just one aerospace company? The fallout would be an absolute catastrophe. Every other company that went bankrupt could sue for an unfair advantage. He says the damages wouldn't be in the billions, but potentially in the trillions of dollars. But as shocking as a multi-trillion-dollar cover-up sounds, it's really nothing compared to the next reason he reveals. He claims there's a very powerful group deep inside the government that's been opposing this research, not for strategic or financial reasons, but for spiritual ones.
Yeah, seriously, this is where the story takes a sharp turn into the surreal. Elizondo says that during his time at the Pentagon, he kept hitting a brick wall of resistance from very senior officials who held a truly shocking belief about what these UAPs actually are. He claims he was told this to his face by a senior government leader. Not that UAPs were a threat from China, not that they were a hoax, but that they were demonic, and that humanity should not be investigating them.
and that humanity should not be investigating them. Just wow. And he insists this wasn't just some one-off comment, but a viewpoint held by a number of senior figures.
But here's the twist. Elizondo also points out a counter-argument that comes from the very same religious framework. He says that while some are calling them demons, others are looking back at biblical events like Ezekiel's wheel and asking, hey, wait a minute, were those UAP encounters? He even mentions that the Vatican has historical documents describing flaming shields in the sky, so it seems there's a serious spiritual debate happening at the highest levels.
Okay, so all of this, the arms race, the potential intelligence failure of the century, the secrecy, the holy war inside the Pentagon, it brings us right back to that ticking clock. And according to Elizondo, that clock just might be counting down to a very specific date.
The year is 2027. Now, Elizondo is very careful to call this anecdotal, but he confirms it's a year he has heard mentioned in official channels as being significant.
And here's the kicker. He says he heard this time frame being discussed while he was working directly with the U.S. Space Force. So while it's not some official proclamation, it's a lot more than just a random internet rumor. It's being talked about in some very interesting rooms.
And this brings us to the second, deeper meaning of the ticking clock. It's not just about some adversary's new weapon. Elizondo says it's also about preparing society. No government wants to be caught completely flat-footed by a revelation of this magnitude. The goal is to socialize the idea with all of us beforehand. Because if a huge announcement just dropped out of the blue, it could totally shatter public trust in, well, everything. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question raised by this whole insider warning. When you put all the pieces together, the geopolitics, the financial implications, and even the spiritual debate that Elizondo lays out, the question isn't just if an announcement is coming. It's whether we, as a society, are truly ready for what comes next.